Hi everyone, it's Sal here, and today I'm going to go over how I created this retro Nike ad using Blender. For this video, I wanted to create a 3D visual for a Nike jacket I had designed called the Nike Astro Motion. Now, this jacket was heavily inspired by the retro-futuristic aesthetics from the 80s, and I wanted to create a 3D visual that would suit it perfectly. Now, at this point I only had some rough sketches. To be able to animate this jacket, I had to turn my sketches into a real 3D model. And to do this, I used Marvelous Designer. It's my go-to software for creating outfits and clothing for my visuals. And if you're interested in learning it, I have a full crash course on my YouTube channel that you can check out. I'll have a link to it below. Now, hopping into Marvelous Designer, I used one of my pre-made templates to create the basic shape. And then I started to add in all the details. I added the logo on the back, the logo on the front, and then the padded sections on the sleeves and the back. And once my jacket was complete, it was time to start brainstorming ways to create a 3D visual for it. And my favorite place to get inspiration is Pinterest. So I created a new board and then started to pin different concepts and ideas that I liked. Now, because the jacket had a space-related aesthetic, I thought it would be really cool to have the jacket floating around in space. So I started to gather more reference images around that theme. And to truly capture the Nike aesthetic, I knew I needed powerful storytelling, something Nike does extremely well. They often use a compelling phrase or a slogan to engage their audience, whether it's a call to action like "just do it" or a narrative that resonates with personal struggles and triumphs. Nike's ability to encapsulate powerful messages in a few words is what makes their campaign so impactful and memorable. In my case, I chose the phrase "out of this world" as it perfectly aligns with the futuristic and boundary-pushing vision of the project. And of course, because our jacket is literally out of this world since it's in space. So I thought it was perfect. Now, I wanted to have a realistic looking space scene, but I also didn't want to spend hours creating one. Luckily for me, I have Blender Kit, which is a Blender add-on that allows you to easily import models, textures, and completed scenes into your project. I was able to find a pretty realistic looking space scene in a couple of seconds, and with a single click, the scene was added into my project. Next, I added a camera into my scene and set it up until I had a composition that I really liked. I also wanted to render this for Instagram Reels and TikTok, so I made sure that the aspect ratio was set to 1080 by 1920. Now, before I made any other changes to my scene, I wanted to first import in my jacket. So back in Marvelous Designer, I now had to animate this jacket floating. Now, in theory, this should have been pretty easy, except it really wasn't. Essentially, the idea was if I add a wind controller and then point it upwards, the jacket should start to float up. But when I tried this in Marvelous Designer, my jacket didn't look, let's just say, as elegant as I would have liked. But after failing over and over again, I eventually got the jacket to simulate how I wanted. And once I baked the animation, it was time to export the jacket. Next, I imported my jacket into Blender. Now, my jacket didn't have the glowing logo on the back or the front, so I selected the faces and then assigned a new emissive material to them. At this point, everything in my scene was pretty much set up. All that was left to do was animate the camera. I had to make sure that the camera followed the jacket as the jacket moved up. And this was pretty simple. I just had to keyframe the rotation value of my camera to track the movement of the jacket. And then I also keyframed the focal length value to zoom in on my jacket. Lastly, I added in some subtle camera shake to make the camera have that handheld feel to it. While everything seemed to be going pretty well, I noticed one big issue. My jacket was barely visible. And I'm not sure why it took me so long to realize this, but obviously I needed to fix it, so I came up with the easiest solution possible, which was adding an area light and then animating it so it moved up with the jacket. And this actually worked surprisingly well. And with that out of the way, the only thing left to do was some compositing. When I'm going for a more vintage look, I like to add some lens distortion and glare to my visuals. And this was pretty straightforward. I just had to add the following two nodes. But this time I also wanted to add in some lens dirt as well. Now, I had no idea how to do this, but luckily for me, there was a YouTube video that covered exactly what I was looking for. So thank you, Motion Dreams. And if you're interested, this is what my final node setup looked like. And here's a quick before and after the compositing was done. And you can see that the combination of lens distortion, glare, and lens dirt really adds a sense of realism to the final render. And once the compositing was done, I was finally ready to render my final animation. After absolutely cooking my PC for about 3 hours, my animation was finally rendered. Now sadly, I had to cook my PC once again because I had to open up After Effects. Here, I just want to quickly add in the text and the Nike logo. Now, Nike uses the font Futura, so that's the font that I decided to use for the header. Now, I also rendered an additional scene with just the jacket rotating, since you couldn't really see what the full jacket looked like in the first scene. And here I also added a short description which my good friend ChatGPT cooked up for me. And to give my animation a more retro feel, I also added a CC lens effect, which gave my text a subtle bend around the edges, as if it was being displayed on an old TV. And then I went into Premiere Pro and then added in some music and some sound effects I got off of Motion Array. And lastly, to top it all off, I added a VHS filter, which I have no idea where I found, but I had it, so I added it. Anyways, here is the final animation. And that is all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.